Who was Emanuel Swedenborg? A friend of mine introduced me to the works of Swedenborg many years ago, but I was never interested enough then to dive deep into it. Recently, however, I began looking into the doctrines of this important but little understood 18th century mystic and scientist who was born in 1688 and died in 1772. What spurred my interest was an article I read in The New Philosophy, the journal of the Swedenborg Scientific Association. The article was published in a 1967 edition and is entitled "The Presence of Spirits in Madness, a Confirmation of Swedenborg in Recent Empirical Findings," by Dr. Wilson Van Dusen. Van Dusen was chief psychologist at Mendocino State Hospital in California, where he worked with the mentally ill for 17 years. He discovered a way of getting a detailed picture of the inner experience of hallucinations of his patients. Like Swedenborg, he was interested in both science and technology. In this video, I'd like to present some basic information about Swedenborg and his life and theories, and then summarize what he wrote about in one of his most important works, Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell, originally published in 1758. I read the 1912 translated version that is available on archive.org. And then in a subsequent video, I will comment on how Swedenborg's theories support a modern-day emerging alternative theory of mental illness that is gaining respect in the world of psychiatry. As Dr. Van Dusen relates in the above-mentioned article, Swedenborg's findings have profound implications for a new understanding of the cause of mental illness. Swedenborg was born in Stockholm, Sweden in 1688. He studied at the University of Uppsala and then traveled to England, the Netherlands, France, and Germany to work with leading scientists in these countries. He apprenticed as an engineer under the brilliant Swedish inventor Christopher Polhelm and gained the respect of the Swedish king Charles XII, and later with Queen Ulrika Eleonora. Swedenborg gained recognition as a respected scientist. One of his areas of expertise became the study of human anatomy. He longed to discover the connection between the human body and human soul. From 1743 to 1745, he shifted his area of study to theology. Swedenborg believed that this change in focus was precipitated by a mystical experience in which he described how Jesus Christ appeared to him and called him to a new mission. This experience opened his eyes to an entirely different way of looking at human consciousness. Swedenborg produced an extraordinary range of writings based on his out-of-body experiences, in which he related encounters with angels, other planetary beings, and the world of spirits. His vision inspired a new way of thinking of spirituality. He saw nature and humanity as emerging from the spiritual world, and man as a divine vessel influenced by spiritual forces. He viewed the human body as a vehicle for the soul. In a letter in 1769, he wrote, "From my 4th to my 10th year, I was constantly engaged in thought upon God, salvation, and the spiritual life. Several times I revealed things at which my father and mother wondered, saying that angels must be speaking through me. From my 6th to my 12th year, I used to delight in talking with clergymen about faith, saying that the life of faith is love, and that the love which imparts life is love for one's neighbor. Also, that God gives faith to everyone, but that only those receive it who practice that love. I knew of no other faith at that time than that God is the creator and preserver of nature, that he imparts understanding and good disposition to us. I knew nothing at that time of the learned faith, which teaches that God the Father imputes the righteousness of his Son to whomsoever, and at such time as he chooses, even to those who have not repented and have not reformed their lives. And had I heard of such a faith, it would have been then, as it is now, above my comprehension." About 1745, he began to record his dreams and spiritual experiences. He had a spiritual conversion that resulted in his transformation. He writes that he was dining alone in a private room in a London inn when he saw and heard a man or an angel telling him not to eat too much. He saw a vapor rising from his body, which settled on the carpet in the room and then turned into various types of worms, which then burned up. About this experience he wrote, "A fiery light appeared there and a rustling was audible. It felt as if all the worms produced by an immoderate appetite had been expelled and burnt, and I had been purged of them." This was his first conscious encounter with the world of spirits. During this time, Swedenborg seems to have been able to maintain a connection with the newly discovered spiritual world while in ordinary human company. "I mingled with others just as before," he writes, "and no one observed the fact that there was with me such a heavenly intercourse. In the midst of company I have sometimes spoken with spirits and with those who were around me. At such times they could think no otherwise than that I was occupied with my thoughts." Swedenborg was a prolific writer. Over the last 28 years of his life, he wrote and published 18 theological works, and several more that remained unpublished. His most popular book, Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell, was first published in 1758. In it, Swedenborg explores the mysteries of the afterlife. He delves into what lies beyond the natural world and what happens once a human being leaves the physical body behind and enters into the realms beyond this world. He offers readers a glimpse into the wonders of heaven and the depths of hell based upon his own out-of-body experiences. He gives a detailed description of these non-physical realms. It is important at this point to explain how Swedenborg's new philosophy of creation differs from the other two views of creation that were prominent during the 18th century. In the late 1800s, two general theories attempted to explain the origin of nature. One is that God created nature, and the other is that matter is eternal. The first of these teaches that God created the universe and all things out of nothing by simply speaking it into existence. This doctrine was generally received through the teachings of the Christian Church. Any question about the doctrine was swept aside by the saying that, to God, all things are possible. This answer served to silence any queries that asked how something could be made out of nothing. The second theory evolved upon the advent of scientific study, especially of astronomy, geology, and archaeology. Geology showed the Earth was millions of years old. Archaeology showed that man had existed on Earth for much longer than 6,000 years, and geology showed that it took millions of years to bring the Earth into a condition ripe for inhabitation by humans. Therefore, many began to question the idea that creation in 6 days of 24 hours each could be true. The problem with the second theory, however, is how to answer the question of where did all the vast quantity of matter and the energy stored up in it come from? While the theory that an infinite and omnipotent God created the world out of nothing sounds unlikely to the scientific mind, the scientific theory, on the other hand, makes dead matter, which possesses neither wisdom, intelligence, nor willpower, the creator of qualities that did not previously exist either in or out of itself. So this is practically the same doctrine held by the theologians of the creation of something from nothing. Swedenborg supplies an explanation that is lacking in both of the two theories just described. His new philosophy makes the connection between which brings both of them into harmony, and the old theology begins with the Creator at the top of the ladder of causation, but it does not possess the rungs of the ladder which connect it to nature. Science, on the other hand, begins at the bottom of the ladder and tries to ascend to the first cause, but it cannot do so because it does not possess the intermediate steps of the ladder of causation. As a result, it remains on the lowest rung of the ladder and seeks for all causes in the region of dead matter. As a scientist and philosopher, Swedenborg began on the lowest rung of the ladder by investigating the properties and laws of matter. He recognized God as the highest, the origin of all things, and he searched diligently for the intermediate rungs of the ladder, which make the connection between God and nature. In the preface to the book, Swedenborg says that the pages that follow have to do with heaven and hell and with our own life after death. Church people these days know practically nothing about heaven and hell or their life after death. It has been granted to me to be with angels and to talk to them person to person. I have also been enabled to see what is in heaven and in hell, a process that has been going on for 13 years. Now I'm being allowed to describe what I've seen and heard in the hopes of shedding light where there's ignorance and of dispelling skepticism. He begins by stating that the earliest people on planet Earth were heavenly people who thought on the basis of actual correspondences, and that it was the natural phenomena of the world that served them as a means for thinking in this way. Because of this, they were in the company of angels and talked with them, and in this way heaven was united to the world through them. This was during the era called the Golden Age, which classical authors have described as a time when the inhabitants of heaven dwelt with mortals and kept them company as friend with friend. However, this age did not last. During the Silver Age, there was still a union of heaven with humanity, but it was not such an intimate one. Humanity continued to digress during the era called the Bronze Age. Swedenborg says these people were familiar with correspondences, but did not do their thinking on the basis of that knowledge because they were engrossed in what is good on the natural level and not on the spiritual level as their ancestors had. After the Silver Age, humanity became more and more externally minded and at last physically minded. Then the knowledge of correspondences was completely lost, and with it any awareness of heaven and its riches. Swedenborg explains that the names of these ages, golden, silver, and bronze, also come from correspondence, because gold, by reason of correspondence, means the heavenly goodness in which the earliest people lived. Silver means the spiritual goodness in which their successors lived, while bronze means the natural goodness characteristic of their immediate followers. Iron gave its name to the last era and means a harsh truth devoid of good. Swedenborg in this way explains why humans, and remember he's writing in 1758, are devolving spiritually as opposed to evolving. They are no longer in touch with heaven. How does he describe heaven? He says that it is a secret not yet known in this world, that heaven, taken in a single all-inclusive grasp, reflects a single individual. In heaven, though nothing is better known, heaven in its totality reflects a single person, and it is a person in image and is therefore called the universal human. As explained previously, the earliest humans on earth enjoyed a union with heaven's angels and acknowledged the divine in human form. They talked with heaven's angels as they did with members of their own family, and heaven's angels talked with them in the same way. And in them, heaven and the world were a single whole. But after those times, people moved step by step away from heaven because they loved themselves and the world more than heaven and the Lord. They preferred the pleasures of self-love and love of the world and eventually lost their connection with heaven. Their deeper levels, those open to heaven, were closed. Their outer levels, those connected to the world, remained open. So they lost their connection with heaven and the ability to talk with heaven's angels. Some people think they talk with angels, Swedenborg says, but in reality are talking with spirits who are not in heaven. Swedenborg also has something to say about the scholars who keep attributing everything to nature and close the deeper levels of their minds so that they can see no trace of truth from the light of truth, the light of heaven. He says the result of this is that in the other life, they will be deprived of their ability to reason, so they will not use reason to spread false notions among simple and good people and mislead them. They are dismissed to desert areas. He explains that there exists a world of spirits halfway between heaven and hell. This is the realm where humans go after death. The hells are underneath it and the heavens above it. When humans die and go to this world of spirits, they are not yet in either heaven or in hell. In order to gain either heaven or hell after death, humans proceed to this realm to be sorted out. Swedenborg says that no one in heaven or hell is allowed to have a divided mind. Anyone in heaven who intends what is good understands what is true, and anyone in hell who intends what is evil understands what is false. Swedenborg explains that there are good spirits and evil spirits with every individual. We have our union with heaven through the good spirits and our union with hell through the evil ones. He says we are spirits, and our physical nature is given to us only so we may function in the natural and material world. This physical self, however, is only a tool utilized by our spirit and is not the real person. When we die, we simply move from one world to another. After separation from the body, the human spirit remains a person and is in similar form. Swedenborg claims that when he would explain to spirits that he communicated with that people in the world do not believe this, he said they are heartsick over the fact that this kind of ignorance is still common in the world and especially in the church, and that this belief stems from academics who have thought about the soul on the basis of physical sensory reality only. He describes what happens after humans who die enter the world of spirits. He says that after we leave our bodies, we are still alive and just as human as ever. We then experience a type of life review, where all the evils, thefts, frauds, and deceptions committed by evil spirits are made clear and drawn directly from memory, and they are convicted. There is no room for denial because all the circumstances are presented together. There are 3 states that we pass through after death before we arrive in either heaven or hell. The first state is one of more outward concerns, the second is one of more inward concerns, and the third one is of preparation. We go through these states in the world of spirits. Some people, however, do not go through these states, but are either raised into heaven or cast into hell immediately after their death. There are few such people, though, he says, compared to the number of people who are kept in the world of spirits and prepared there for either heaven or hell according to the divine plan. As soon as we arrive in the other life, we are recognized by our friends and relatives and by people we have known in one way or another. Further, we talk with each other and continue to see each other in keeping with our friendship in the world. The life of newly arrived spirits is not unlike their life in the world, and their friends tell them about the state of eternal life and take them around to various places and into the company of different people. During this stage, their outward concerns cloak their inner ones. They will come out in the open when they arrive in the second state. But this first state after death lasts a few days for some people, months for some, and a year for some, but rarely more than a year for anyone. The difference for particular individuals depends on the harmony or discord between their inner and outer nature. Our second state after death is called a state of our deeper interest, because then we are given access to the deeper reaches of our mind, or of our intentions and thoughts, while the more outward interests that engaged us in the first state become dormant. This state of our deeper concerns is the state in which we engaged in this world when we were left to ourselves and our thinking was free and unfettered. We slip into this second state without realizing it. When we are spirits in this state, we are being ourselves and living our real life. The state of more inward concerns that spirits are led into is their proper state. When spirits are in this state of their deeper concerns, it is obvious what kind of people they really were in the world. They actually behave in accord with their own nature. People who were inwardly devoted to the good in the world behave sanely and wisely, and people who were focused on evil in the world then behave foolishly and insanely. The separation of evil spirits from good spirits takes place in this second state. The third state after death is one of instruction. This state is for people who are entering heaven and becoming angels, but not for people who are entering hell, because these latter cannot be taught. As a result, their second state is also their third, and ends in their turning straight toward their own love, and therefore toward the hellish community that is engaged in a love like their own. Swedenborg comments that there's no way to change one's life after death, no way to rewrite an evil life into a good one, or a hellish life into an angelic one. No one who lived an evil life is accepted into heaven out of sheer mercy. The life that leads to heaven is not one of withdrawal from the world, but a life in the world. A life of piety apart from a life of thoughtfulness does not lead to heaven, but a life of thoughtfulness, of behaving honestly and fairly in every duty, every business transaction, every task from our deeper nature, does. How does Swedenborg describe hell? First of all, he declares that the Lord does not cast anyone into hell. Spirits cast themselves in, not only while living in the world, but after death as well, when they arrive among spirits. He says we come into heaven if our love is heavenly, and into hell if our love is materialistic and worldly and without any heavenly and spiritual dimension. While evil can be hidden in this world, the same does not hold true in the world of spirits. All is uncloaked, and the true natures of spirits are revealed. There are 3 levels of heaven overall beyond the intermediate world of spirits: the natural heaven, the spiritual heaven, and the celestial heaven. Correspondingly, there are also 3 levels of hell. Before evil people are thrown down into hell, they are stripped of what is true and good, and once these elements have been taken away, they move voluntarily into hell. The Lord does not strip them of good and truth. They do it to themselves. Swedenborg describes some of the work that is done in heaven. He says there are general categories of angels' activities, but each individual has his or her specific contribution to make. This is because every general service is made up of countless elements that are called mediate or subservient or supporting services. All of these are arranged and ranked according to the divine design, and taken together, they make up and complete an overarching function that is the common good. To enable me to know what heaven and heavenly joy are and what their quality is, though, the Lord has allowed me to feel the pleasures of heavenly joy often and at length. Because this was living experience, I may indeed know about them, but there is no way to describe them. Still, something should be said in order to provide at least some notion about them. There is an effect of countless pleasures and joys that unite to present a single something, a unity or united affection that contains a harmony of countless affections. It was still possible to perceive that there were countless elements within it, so beautifully arranged as to defy description. The quantities of these countless elements flow from the very design of heaven. In a word, there are infinite elements in a most intricate form in every general activity, and there is nothing that is not alive and does not affect everything, even at the very center, since heavenly joys emanate from the very center. The main task of spirits in the heavens is to progress from the lowest heaven to the spiritual heaven, and then to the celestial heaven, the highest level of all. What do the spirits in hell look like? Swedenborg says, there is only a general likeness among people who are absorbed in similar evils and therefore in the same hellish community, a similarity that acts like a common background that gives the individual faces a kind of overall resemblance. In general, their faces are frightful, as lifeless as corpses. Some of their faces are black, some like little torches, some pimply with huge ulcerated sores. In many cases, there is no visible face, only something hairy or bony in its place, while with others only the teeth show. Their bodies are equally misshapen, and their speech seems to embody wrath or hatred or vengeance, since all their articulation comes from their false perception, and all the tone comes from their evil intent. In a word, they are all images of their hell. When spirits freely arrive at their hell and go in, they are accepted cordially at first and think they have arrived among friends. This lasts only a few hours, though. All the while they are being probed to find out how crafty they are and therefore how powerful. Once this probing is complete, the attacks begin in various ways, getting more and more severe and intense. The intensification is affected by their being taken further and deeper into hell, since the farther and deeper you go there, the more malevolent are the spirits. After these attacks, the malevolent spirits begin to torment the newcomers with punishments, until finally they are reduced to slavery. As for the appearance of hells, Swedenborg has this to say. Some of these hells look like the dens of wild animals in the woods, some like the vaulted chambers and crypts found in mines with caverns leading downward. Many of the hells are threefold. The higher ones look gloomy inside because the people there are fond of malicious distortions. The lower ones look fiery, though, because their inhabitants are devoted to malice itself. Darkness, in fact, corresponds to malicious distortions and fire to the actual malice. That is, the people in the deeper hells are the ones who acted from evil on a deeper level, while the people in the hells that are not so deep acted from evils on a more superficial level. That is, on the basis of their malicious distortions. In some hells, there are nothing but brothels, foul to look at and full of all kinds of filth and excrement. There are also dark forests where hellish spirits roam like wild beasts, and there are underground caves where they flee when they are being threatened by others. Then there are desert areas where everything is barren and sandy, with rugged cliffs here and there with caves in them and huts scattered around as well. People are exiled from the hells into these desert places if they have suffered to the limit, especially people who in the world were craftier than others in the skills of deliberate manipulation and deceit. This kind of life is their final lot. In part 2, I will analyze Swedenborg's thoughts on the spirit world and the connection between it and mental illness. See you next time. Thanks for watching.